I heard a funny story the other day from my cousin, Kirsty. She's a student teacher at a primary school in Perth. They were having some circle time where they all just sit down and say what they think about something. Anyway, this particular circle time was about goals, and the kids were taking their time and taking their turns answering the question of the day, which happened to be, what do you want to be remembered for? Of course, all the little boys were fairly predictable with answers like soccer or cricket, and the little girls weren't much better or wanting to be actresses or pop stars. But one little girl, when my cousin asked her, what do you want to be remembered for, said, ever. Which brings me to what I want to talk about today. That little girl had something which I think is very important. She wasn't afraid to want to be the hero of her own story, to want to be remembered forever. The links between storytelling and leadership are many and complex, with leaders using their stories of a better world to teach or inspire hope and change. As people, stories are a vital part of who we are. We read or go to the movies to hear stories, and we do this for fun or relaxation. We tell stories to our friends to share something, and hear them from our teachers when we want to learn. It's why we read to little kids even before they can understand, and it's why that stories can make us laugh, move us to tears, make us angry, or inspire us. Human beings are hardwired for stories. That's why, whenever someone really wants us to respond to something, they tell us a story. Stories of poverty elicit donations and volunteers, and stories of injustice can incite rebellion. Which is why leaders are storytellers. Google Defined tells me that storytelling is the conveying of events in words, images, and sounds, but I think that's wrong. Storytelling is so much more than that. Storytelling is about ideas, hopes, and dreams. About truth and fact, yes, but just as important is the imaginary and the fantasy. I think that storytelling is when we share our dreams, our hopes, and our ideas for a better future, a better way of life, and a better world with others. Storytellers who can do this in a way that make people go, hey, yeah, I could do that, or yes, that does need to change, are storytellers and leaders. Napoleon Bonaparte once said that a leader is a dealer in hope, and I agree with him. The ability to inspire hope and the will to change in others is why leaders are so important in our society. One of the earliest examples of leadership we can see in someone's life is parents teaching their children how to be good people. Parents instill their values like trust, honesty, responsibility, and integrity in their children through stories. For example, Winnie the Pooh always tells the truth, and Wendy has to trust Peter Pan and Tinkerbell to allow her to fly to Neverland. The Bible, no matter what you believe, is full of parables, which are stories that basically outline a pretty good guide to living life. You know, work hard, help out, don't kill people, that sort of thing. I guess the question is then, why is it that people are so susceptible to stories? I think it's because that when you dream, you can be anyone you want to be. You can escape school or you can change the world. It's why teenagers daydream in class. Imagine with me for a moment. You're sitting in history and you're bored out of your brain, thinking, God, this could be so much better. So you daydream. It's why I think teenagers are such great leaders, something that adults don't really recognise. You're young enough not to rule out the impossible, but you're old enough to start thinking about how you can make it happen. 200 years ago, the technology and medicine we have today would have been considered magic. Future technology might seem impossible to us, but out there, somewhere, is someone who's been thinking, hey, I know how that might work. To make the impossible a reality, someone has to go, we can do that. Their ideas become a story, and they inspire others to join them in that story. And that's leadership. Martin Luther King Jr., he had a dream. Napoleon Bonaparte, he wanted to conquer. Aung San Suu Kyi, she's fighting for democracy. Gandhi, Mandela, Ayan Hirsi, all leaders, all who touch the lives of thousands, if not millions, with their words and stories. And so history shows us that storytellers are leaders, simply because of what storytelling is in itself. I guess a really modern-day example of this would be politics. Politicians have to see a problem in a country and then tell people how much better it could be, often embellishing the story into the realms of pure political rubbish. Of course, this is how we elect, trying to find a comparison and a compromise between the most attractive story and the most feasible solution. Politicians have to use storytelling to make people go, hey, maybe Julia Gillard is the fairy godmother of public education after all. Of course, not all fairy tales and stories can have a happy ending. Not all leaders are perfect. And not all situations have quick, easy and neat solutions. And just sometimes we get taken in by the magic of a story before we can think about the actual implications. Just look, how else could George Bush have ended up as the president of the USA for 8 years? But in all seriousness, a good example of a story gone wrong is that of Burma, also known as Myanmar, and its struggle for freedom from military oppression. It's in stories like this where the true heroes emerge. Leaders like Aung San Suu Kyi. She too was once a little girl who will now be remembered forever. She too had a dream of democracy and the guts to fight for it, and she spent over 14 of the last 20 years under house arrest. But because she has never given up fighting for what she believes in, people all around the world tell her story. U2 even wrote their song Walk On about her. She has inspired hope for a better world in millions with her words, and history will never forget her tale. Even as today, it is still being written. One thing I think that history has taught us is that no matter how far away a happy ending seems, you'll never get there if you give up. If you're not willing to be wrong, if you're too afraid to make mistakes, and if you're not brave enough to give it a go, then you'll never change anything or come up with anything new, and no one's going to remember your story. You need to make the jump from, I wish that would change, to, I can be the one to change it. Walter Bagehot once said that all the best stories in the world are but one story in reality, the story of escape. I disagree. I think they're the stories of change. All over the world, every day, countless stories are being written, and not just the new J.K. Rowling books either, but life stories too. Stories of people inventing something that could change the world, or excelling in their chosen field. Stories of people being the best that they can be. Everyone in the world has their own story, weaving together with that of the people around them, and sometimes into an event that history will never forget. You all have your own stories too, and they're only just beginning. Each one is different, even as each one of you is different. 12-year-old writer and blogger Adora Svitak said that in order to make anything possible, you have to dream about it first. The question is, though, that when you have a hope, an idea, or a dream for a better world, what are you going to do with it? We're not all going to be like Mandela or Gandhi, but that doesn't mean we each can't be leaders in our own lives. And I dare you, like that little girl, to want to be remembered forever, and then try to be the hero of your own story.